And good afternoon. We now open this hearing on the merits and possible reparations and costs in the case of Purakal and others versus Nicaragua. I extend a warm welcome to the delegations of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and to the representatives of the alleged victims. This public hearing is being held in the framework of the 178th regular session of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. I wish to inform you that the President, Nancy Hernandez Lopez, will not be participating in this hearing as she is currently representing the court at the General Assembly of the Organization of American States. I now give the floor to the Deputy Registrar of the Court, Ms. Gabriela Pacheco, so that she can make the relevant clarifications. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear the statements of 3 alleged victims and 1 expert witness proposed by the representative of the alleged victims. In addition, the court will hear the final arguments of the representatives of the alleged victims and the final observations of the Inter-American Commission on the merits and possible reparations and costs. I note for the record that the state of Nicaragua has not appointed any agents to represent it at this hearing. We would like to inform you that this hearing is being broadcast live on the official platforms and social media of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. I thus welcome the delegation of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, represented by Ms. Cristina Blanco, coordinator of the Cases section of the Executive Secretariat, and Mr. Ignacio Bollier, advisor to the Executive Secretariat. We also would like to welcome the representatives of the alleged victims, Mr. Thomas Antkowiak, Director of the Human Rights Clinic at the University of Seattle's School of Law, and Ms. Alejandra Gonza, Legal Advisor. Pursuant to Article 51 of the Rules of Procedure, the court will first hear from the Inter-American Commission, which will briefly present the case and will explain the grounds for its submission to the court, and will raise any matters that it considers relevant to its resolution. Subsequently, the court will hear the statements of 3 alleged victims and 1 expert witness. The representatives of the alleged victims may question the deponents within the time previously established. Next, the representatives of the alleged victims may present their final oral arguments on the merits and possible reparations and costs. And finally, the commission will present its final observations. This hearing will begin today and will continue tomorrow. We would like to remind everyone that to respect the allotted times for their interventions. Likewise, we also kindly ask to please speak clearly and slowly to facilitate the effort by the interpreters. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Registrar. I now give the floor to the Inter-American Commission so that they may present the case. I ask to please indicate to the court who will be speaking and their role. Thank you very much. I'm Cristina Blanco. I'm the coordinator for the cases of the Inter-American Commission. I will carry out the initial presentation with your permission, Mr. Vice President. Go ahead. The Commission greets the judges of the Honorable Inter-American Court, the victims and their representatives. Honorable Court, Jason Purakal is a U.S. citizen who at the time of the facts resided in Nicaragua with his family. On November 11th of 2010, he was arrested by the National Police when he was in his real estate office. Simultaneously, his domicile was also raided by the police. These activities occurred without a warrant. At the time, Purakal was led to a police station, a local police station, and 2 days later to the Rivas prison. During his transfer to that prison, he was threatened and beaten. On November 15th, he was transferred again to the prison known as El Chipote, where he was placed in a filthy jail cell without access to sunlight or proper nourishment. Finally, on November 17th, he was taken to La Modelo prison, where he suffered overcrowding, unhealthy conditions, and a limited access to drinking water or hygiene products. He remained in preventive prison at that establishment for 22 months until he was excarcerated and deported from Nicaragua in September of 2012. A criminal proceeding was begun against Purakal, where he was first sentenced to 22 years in prison for organized crime, money laundering, and illegal drug trafficking. Subsequently, an appeals court voided that sentence and ordered him to be excarcerated. A few days later, he was deported from Nicaragua. In the report on the merits, the commission declared that the state violated the right to personal freedom by Mr. Purakal because his arrest did not have a warrant. The state did not prove flagrancy nor notify the reasons for his arrest. In addition, Nicaragua did not notify him of his right to receive consular assistance, nor let him immediately before a judicial authority for the purposes of checking on the legality of his arrest. The commission also considered that preventive prison was arbitrary because it was based on a regulation that established the automatic application of this standard based on the type of crime, and it was extended also for an unreasonable time frame. Likewise, the commission concluded that the right to personal integrity of Mr. Purakal was violated because the arrests were contrary to the minimum standards on this topic. The commission also identified that he was not subject to a medical examination when he was sent to prison, and he was placed in a jail cell with other prisoners. The commission also understands that the state violated the rights to judicial guarantees and to judicial protection, since Jason Purakal did not have the adequate means to exercise his defense with an effective recourse, nor due to a pertinent investigation or mistreatment experimented. The commission also determined that Nicaragua is responsible for violating the rights to honor and dignity and private property because the raids against his domicile and office did not have a warrant, and the state never returned the assets seized nor remunerated him for the losses caused. The commission concluded, likewise, that the state is responsible for violating the right to free circulation and residence because it did not respect the minimum standards of due process in the administrative proceedings that led to his deportation from Nicaraguan territory. Finally, the commission identified that they violated the integrity of the relatives of Mr. Purakal as a consequence of the suffering caused by his illegal and arbitrary arrest, the lack of due process, and the mistreatment that he was subjected to. After notification of the report to the state on December 1st of 2023, the commission did not receive any information with regards to the implementation of the recommendations. In these circumstances, it decided to submit this case before the court to obtain justice and reparations. Honorable Court, the commission considers that this case will allow continuing your jurisprudence on the obligation on the part of the states to ensure that arrests without a warrant with an alleged flagrancy fulfill a minimum standard of exceptionality. Likewise, the court will be able to speak on the inter-American standards and deepen their judgments on the conditions of arrests that are compatible with the convention and the respect of the guarantees that are applicable in the processes of extradition and deportation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the representatives of the Inter-American Commission. I ask the Deputy Secretary to call the first witness proposed and to take their data and make pertinent verification. We ask Jason Purakal to come and provide his witness testimony. Good afternoon, Mr. Purakal. Can you hear me? We ask the witness to state name, nationality, and country of residence. Thank you very much. With the Nicaraguan criminal system in his condition as an immigrant from the United States, and the suffering occurred in the various detention centers during his imprisonment. The impact by the sentencing and the difficulties in recovering his freedom and being acknowledged innocent, and the reparations that he considers pertinent in this case. We inform the witness that in accordance with Article 53 of the regulation of the court, the states may not try the alleged victim, the witnesses or experts, their representatives or legal advisors, nor exercise any repercussions against them or their relatives as a result of their testimonies or their legal defense before the court. Thank you, Mr. President. I would now grant the floor to the representation of the alleged victims so that they may proceed with questioning.
Modelo, the maximum security prison in Nicaragua.
Can you explain to us where you are from and why you were in Nicaragua to begin with?
So I grew up in just south of Seattle in Washington State of the United States of America. When I was in high school, I was a volunteer firefighter, and I volunteered in the emergency room at the hospital where my mother worked as a doctor. When I graduated from the university in 2002, I joined Peace Corps. They sent me to Nicaragua to work for sustainable agriculture. As a Peace Corps volunteer, I lived near Esteli in the north for my 3 months of training, and for my 1 year of service, my site was El Tule, a small village of about 30 families in the mountains near San Sebastián de Yali. I fell in love with Nicaragua. It is a beautiful country, the culture is very laid back, and the people are very humble. After my service ended, I returned to Seattle, saved up enough money to buy a truck, and drove back to Nicaragua on my own. Upon my return, I ended up getting a job in a real estate office in San Juan del Sur. I did really well in the office. I immediately started managing it, and after 3 years, a couple of other agents and myself were able to buy out the broker. I married a Nicaraguan woman, Scarlett Flores, from Managua, and we had our first son together. I continued to be engaged with the Nicaraguan community, from donating trash cans for the beach every Semana Santa, to buying books for the library, to creating sustainable development projects to employ hundreds of local Nicaraguans and indigenous peoples for agriculture, reforestation, and tourism. Nicaragua is my home.
So, what exactly happened on the day that you were arrested?
So on Thursday, November 11th, 2010, my life changed for forever. Police in black uniforms with masks and assault rifles came storming into my real estate office. I thought I was being robbed. They did not present a warrant, and they would not allow me to call my wife, my attorney, or even the US Embassy. They confiscated my business and personal property, and after being held at gunpoint for hours, they threw me in the back of a pickup truck in handcuffs and paraded me around town. It was humiliating. That same night, they raided my house, stealing my belongings and terrifying my family. At the San Juan del Sur jail, the police took photos of me and put me in the driver's seat of my truck to perform a canine search of the vehicle. And they took samples of my truck and my clothing. But I still had no idea what I was being charged with.
I know this is all very difficult to talk about, but if you wouldn't mind explaining a bit more about what happened later, what happened next.
Sure. So after my arrest, the abuse got even worse. During the transfer to the Rivas jail in the middle of the night with a bunch of other prisoners, the officers were shouting at us to keep our heads down and threatened to shoot anyone who moved. I was hit in the back of the head and in the arm with the butt of a pistol and jabbed with something sharp in the back. They called us the scorpions of society, and they stopped the vehicle repeatedly in dark, isolated areas. I thought we were going to be executed. In Rivas, 10 of us were shoved into 2 cells, 3 foot by 3 foot, and held there for hours. Eventually, I was moved to a crowded cell with 6 others, some of them convicted, some of them still waiting trial. The police confiscated my clothes, and then the next day they returned my clothes to me in a torn plastic bag, and my boxer shorts were missing. They had me put the clothes back on and again took samples. Days after my arrest, when the charges were finally read before a judge, international drug trafficking, money laundering, organized crime, I was handed a list of rights. Reading through the list, I immediately saw that most of my rights had already been violated. But when I questioned this, the police just laughed at me and told me to sign the document. At the preliminary hearing, no drugs were presented and no evidence linked me to the other defendants. The other defendants kept asking me, "Who are you and why are you here?" Yet the judge allowed the case to proceed.
I understand. And so what happened after the Rivas jail? Where did they take you? Where did they take you next?
I was moved again in the middle of night to El Chapote, a secret underground prison in Managua. The conditions were inhumane. I was held in a dark cell with broken beds, no clothes, no towel, no light, no toilet paper. The floor was covered in garbage and human waste. I heard screaming from other prisoners who were being tortured. I was fed a small amount of noodles only once during the 3 days that I was there, and told to drink water from a rusted spout. I had no contact with anyone, no attorney, no consulate, no family. No human being should be subjected to such treatment.
I agree. After that, you were taken to La Modelo prison. What was it like there? Could you describe that situation?
Yes, eventually I was moved to La Modelo prison, which became my home for the next 22 months. For most of my time, I was held in a 12-foot by 15-foot cell with a hole in the corner for a toilet, and I shared it with 9 to 12 other men. For the first 5 months, I was kept in the cell constantly and even denied access to sunlight. I suffered from serious medical issues that went untreated. I developed a shoulder injury so painful I couldn't raise my arm for 3 months. The prison doctor denied me an inhaler for respiratory problems triggered by secondhand smoke, dust, and burning plastic. The inmates would smoke cigarettes, marijuana, even crack inside our cell. There was no escape. The food was horrible. It made me sick. I spent 22 months with constant digestive pain, cycling between constipation and diarrhea. At one point, my abdominal muscles were so tight I could barely breathe or even stand. After being carried to the infirmary multiple times, the doctor recommended me for surgery without even examining me. The guards told me to go back to my cell to die. Eventually, I was sent to a hospital in handcuffs, crawling because the guards refused to help me walk. There, I was handcuffed to a dirty bed in a public room with a bunch of other patients looking on, but under constant watch by armed guards. Again, humiliating. A doctor told me my pain was from the lack of fruits and vegetables and the sleeping conditions that would not change. The cells in the prison are infected with ticks and chiggers, ants, cockroaches, and mosquitoes. The nights are sleepless because of the biting insects and the lights and the noise. In the cells where I was kept in, there was no running water. Prisoners have to haul 2 buckets of water every day, but the water has hair and dirt and insects floating in it. It is not potable. One day, while trying to boil water, I burned my legs. The wounds became seriously infected because the guards denied me proper medical treatment. I only saved my legs because my mother flew down to visit me, provided me with antibiotics, and taught me how to treat my wound. I still carry the scars to this day. Violence was constant in the prison. Inmates tried to stab each other. Guards beat prisoners in front of me. I saw a man on crutches shoved to the floor by a guard. My cell was attacked numerous times. I was robbed, harassed, and made an outcast. I developed severe digestive problems, shoulder injuries, back pains, respiratory infections, burns from the boiling water, and severe rashes from insect bites. Again, I still live with the physical scars on multiple parts of my body.
Now, transitioning to your legal case, do you believe that your rights to due process were observed during your case?
From the very beginning of my trial, my case, my legal rights were ignored. Throughout the case, I was denied privacy while meeting with my attorney. I was denied a translator and access to evidence. At trial, police presented fabricated test results from a drug testing machine. It was obvious that they used the same photo for every defendant. The police gave false financial evidence based on documents that had nothing to do with me. My attorney was blocked from presenting defense evidence or rebutting charges. The accountant for the real estate office was not allowed to testify. My bank wrote a statement saying they knew where every dollar came from and where every dollar went to, but the judge said it was irrelevant. Motions were ignored. I missed court dates because the police would not transport me to the court. And when they did transport me, I had to sit with my head between my legs for hours at a time and was denied bathroom breaks. I watched high-ranking police meet privately with the judge before every decision. Witnesses were coached, evidence was fabricated. I was convicted without a fair trial, sentenced to 22 years.
After your conviction, how and when were you released?
Thanks to international media, public pressure, and my family's relentless campaign, the conviction was vacated on appeal. The appeals court found insufficient evidence and violation of my rights. I was released in September 2012, malnourished, traumatized, and deported from the country. My wife and son joined me in the United States. We had nothing. We lost our vehicle, our house, our business, our investments, our bank accounts. We had to rebuild our lives from zero.
Could you tell the Honorable Court a little bit more about how you've been since your release from jail in Nicaragua?
Yeah, I still carry the scars of this ordeal. I live with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I have night terrors where I dream of the police chasing me or being back in prison or my sons dying in my arms. My son called someone else Papa while I was in prison. I have anxiety and bouts of depression. I've struggled to re-enter normal life. My body is still in constant pain. My reputation was damaged, my business destroyed, and my sense of identity shaken. My wife and I have just suffered indescribable stress. We are forced to abandon our home, our family, and our life in Nicaragua. Even today, I cannot safely return.
Mr. Purakal, what precisely are you asking of the Inter-American Court today?
I am asking that this court acknowledge the truth, to hold the state of Nicaragua accountable, and to order full reparations. What happened to me should never happen to anyone. But the sad truth is, it is still happening right now in Nicaragua and in far too many other places around the world. That is why I'm here not only to share what I endured, but to ask this court to act, to help ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen again. The first step is transparency. I'm asking the court to require that Nicaragua allow independent human rights organizations to monitor its courtrooms and investigate all criminal cases. My trial was decided before it even began. All of these violations to my human rights were occurring, and no one was there to see it. No observer, no advocate, no independent eyes on a system that was functioning in complete darkness. That darkness is what allows injustice to survive. It must be replaced with oversight, accountability, and the international standards of due process that every human being deserves. The second demand is even more urgent: humane prison conditions. La Modelo was not just overcrowded, it was inhumane by design. All of these violations of human rights took place in a system with no separation between the innocent and the convicted. No safe access to fresh air or fresh water, balanced diet or medical attention, no plan for emergencies, and no basic respect for the dignity of the people inside. What I lived through was a violation not just of my rights, but of the standards the world has already agreed upon. I asked this court to require that Nicaragua align its prisons with the UN standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. Those rules aren't just abstract. They mean drinkable water, fresh food, proper ventilation, timely medical care, safe exercise, and protection from infestation and disease. They mean real sunlight, real space, real separation between people accused and people already convicted. They mean closing places like El Chapote, the underground torture site where I was sent to, where no light enters and many never come out. But reform is not enough. We also ask this court to require that Nicaragua publicly acknowledge the truth. The state should be ordered to publish the facts of this case as determined by the court in national newspapers, television, and on government websites. Not just for my sake, but because the people of Nicaragua deserve to know what their justice system has done in their name. The only way to restore truth is to restore trust is to confront the truth openly and publicly. And finally, I ask for something deeply personal: that my name and the name of my wife, Magu Scarlett Flores Vargas, be cleared from any criminal record in Nicaragua. We were innocent. We have always been innocent, but the damage done to our names, our reputations, and our futures continues to follow us. We are not statistics. We are not case numbers. We are people, and we deserve to be restored. I did not come to this court to seek revenge. I came here to seek justice and to protect others, because I survived what many do not survive. I endured the darkness and the silence, but I'm here now asking you to shine a light.
Mr. Purakal, I see we're almost out of time, but are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the court?
Yes, thank you. This has not only been a personal nightmare, it has been a failure of justice, a violation of human dignity, and a breach of international human rights. I survived because many people fought for me, but I speak today for those who are still trapped, who are still in darkness, who do not have a voice. I ask this court to ensure that what happened to me never happens again. Not in Nicaragua, not anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a la representación de las presuntas víctimas.
To the representatives of the alleged victims, I now ask the judges of the court if they wish to pose any questions. Judge Diego Moreno Rodriguez, do you have any questions? Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much for granting me the ability to speak.
Yes, I can hear you. You're welcome. Please. I don't know what the motives were behind the case. It became very obvious once we got in the case that it was a very politically motivated case against the other defendants in the case. People challenging the current administration in public elections. However, I didn't know any of those people. I wasn't a supporter of those candidates. So how or why I was involved in the case is beyond me. My family, started to try to figure that out at the beginning of my case, but with limited resources, we just had to focus on the facts and the merits of the case, and so couldn't determine the motivation.
Okay. Do you remember around the time in which the initial arrest intervention was made? Do you recall the approximate time of the day was it?
It was just in the afternoon, around maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I had just sent my secretary to the bank to make a withdrawal, and the other agents in my office were all out of the office. So I was alone in the real estate office in the afternoon when the police initially stormed the office. But it was dark, nightfall. I don't know the exact time, maybe after 9 o'clock by the time that they put me in handcuffs and threw me in the back of the pickup truck.
Okay. And you mentioned you were paraded. Can you specify, can you give us more details about what does it mean being paraded? Before whom? In what ways were you paraded? Why were you paraded?
Yeah, the town of San Juan del Sur is not a big town, but there's one-way streets and two-way streets in the town. My office is in front of the beach, and when they put me in the back of the pickup truck, instead of taking the direct route to go from where the office is to where the jail is, they took a very long route that went down and back before the beach. They went around the long way around by the park and the church, and then through the streets before taking the one street that goes out of town towards the jail.
Okay. You said that it was only days after your arrest that you were handed a list of your rights. Did I get you right? Is that the way things happened?
That's correct.
And how was this list handed to you in the format of a paper? Did someone read your rights? How did this happen?
No, it was a piece of paper that was written. I believe that they had if I'm remembering correctly, had a copy that they gave to me, and I read through it, and identifying what the rights were. I started questioning. It said on there something about having to go before a judge within a certain time, having to.
And excuse me for the interruption.
Yes, go ahead.
How's your Spanish, Mr. Purakal? Did you understand this? What you were reading? Is your Spanish good enough?
I understand some of it. I could because I dealt with a lot of legal documents for the real estate office in both English and in Spanish. I could read Spanish decently. I didn't ever formally have Spanish lessons, right? Or didn't study Spanish when I was in school. So I kind of learned by living there, doing business and interacting with the community. So I could read as much as I could understand. I understood most of the words. Speaking Spanish is easier, but listening to people speak Spanish takes me a little bit more time. People have to speak a little bit slower. I have to watch their mouth. And that was
Okay,
what was
okay.
so traumatic. Like when the police were yelling at us in the vehicles, I had to look up to see what they were saying, and they would tell us to put our heads back down, and that's why I kept getting beaten in the head.
Okay. While you were in prison, and where was the American consulate? You're an American citizen? Where was did you have access to the American consulate?
The folks, representatives from the U.S. Embassy came to visit me once in the Rivas jail. And then when I was in La Modelo, I would see them occasionally, but it would go like up to 5 months without seeing them. So it wasn't consistent, the visits from the U.S. Embassy.
And when your deportation happened, did you get any consular assistance of some sort?
I don't remember the embassy coming to visit me when I was deported.
Prior to the deportation? And
Prior to the deportation. No,
okay,
I don't remember
okay.
that. The prison guards just told me that my residency had expired while I was in prison. I had, had legal residency there and was actually eligible for dual citizenship and planning to apply for that. But yeah, while I was in prison, my residency had expired, and obviously I wasn't able to go before the immigration office to renew my residency while I was wrongfully incarcerated.
Okay. And let me ask you about your children. I believe you have two kids.
That's
I
correct.
believe one of them has a disability. Is this correct?
That's right.
How have these events impacted them? Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yes, my older son, Jabu, has Down syndrome. He was 3 years old when I went in to prison, and then 5 when I got out. And it was, yeah, very devastating to him during the case, as well as after the case. The things that, happened to him while I was in the case, which I assume my wife will talk about in her testimony. They had to move out of our house. They had to flee the country at one point in time. He had to leave his school. There was a lot of instability, and he was constantly, shuffled around while my wife was trying to bring me food or visit me in prison. So there's a lot of just instability and a lot of stress in the house while my wife was suffering on the outside and I was suffering on the inside. When he would come to visit with me, I would just be in tears in the visiting area, and he was trying to console me.
How old was Jazz when this was going on?
Jazz was
he born
not
already?
born until after the case ended.
Okay.
So only Jabu was born during my incarceration, and then yeah, as I mentioned, Jabu was started calling somebody else Papa. When we came back, when I was deported from the country and we're living in the United States, he had like on the first on during Halloween is a very scary time for him, seeing people in masks because he was traumatized with people, police invading the house, terrorizing him and his mother and his grandmother while I was there. So Halloween
would
is
you
his
have
worst holiday.
preferred them if this hadn't happened, that they grew up in Nicaragua? Would you have preferred them to grow up there?
Absolutely. We, had made Nicaragua our home. We had a successful business there. We were not planning to return to the United States. And so, yeah, we had invested in the community and, had set up a preventive medicine clinic there and a school. And so we were very involved with the community and expecting Jabu to grow up there, both of our kids to grow up there as their home.
Thank you very much for your replies. You've been very direct and concrete. Just one final question.
Please.
You've been through the justice system. So what does justice mean to you today, Mr. Purakal? Do you still believe in justice?
It's I believe that the system is there for a reason, and many people before me have worked to make the justice system work to the best of its ability, and that there are corrupt people that are taking advantage of loopholes and creating injustices. And this is where transparency, accountability, oversight by international human rights organizations, organizations like the court itself are critical to making sure that there's a balanced and fair justice system.
Do you think this court can be useful in restoring the justice system?
Absolutely. That's why we're here before the court today.
Thank you, Mr. Purakal. You've been very kind. Thank you. I don't have any further questions, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias, juez Diego Moreno Rodríguez. Yo pregunto ahora, juez
Rodriguez. Judge Alberto Borea, do you have any questions? Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Purakal. The very first question. Once the trial was declared void or null, was annulled, 2 days later, you were deported to the United States. Is that correct?
I don't remember the exact timing between the trial being declared a null at the appellate level and my deportation and my when the Carta de Libertad, the letter of freedom is was issued, and then my final release. I know it didn't happen immediately. And I actually met prisoners while I was inside that had their letter of freedom for a year and were waiting, couldn't afford a bus ticket or a plane ticket out. So I know my family was working behind the scenes, and my attorney was meeting with the prison guards to arrange everything, but I don't remember the exact amount of time that took.
Yeah, but it could be 1 week, 1 month.
It was definitely less than 1 month.
Less than 1 month.
Yes.
Okay, but you did not do anything in order to be deported. You did not ask to be deported once you got the void decision, right?
That's right. I had expected to be released into the country because I was a resident and had, businesses there and a home there, and so I was expecting to be released. But the prison guards just said, "Nope, your residency has expired, and we are deporting you from the country," and that was it.
Okay. Another question, please. Have you had any quarrel with somebody in the Nicaraguan government, or more than the government, with some officer of the police or some people that could be important in the Sandinista ranks or in the government ranks before your apprehension?
Not that I was aware of. We had really good relationships with the people in government, from the mayor of the town. My wife was working, going to law school and working in the prosecutor's office in San Juan del Sur. We supported the police. We would host a Father's Day event for the police in the town every year. We were constantly, helping the community. President Ortega actually flew into our coffee farm in the north and rated it the #1 sustainable development project in the country. And there was all this media and press around that. And so we thought we had great relationships throughout the different levels of government, and we're supportive. We weren't political in any way. We supported anybody that was, trying to do good for the country and the people of Nicaragua. And so, we are constantly just giving there and trying to be supportive, but apolitical.
So you did not give any political reason in order to be incarcerated or so?
Not to my knowledge. Again, the Sandinistas talk about, supporting the community, being very socialist and wanting to support rural farmers there. And we were doing agricultural projects and helping the community and helping the indigenous community and creating jobs for people, right? And so, yeah, we didn't think that we had anything against anybody in the government. Yeah, so.
Okay. Well, and I think the last question. What happened with the judges that declared void the process, the process that you endured?
Are you referring to the 3-judge panel at the appellate court?
Yeah, the appellate court.
Yeah, my understanding was that there were 3 judges as part of the appeal process, and once we went through that appeal process, my understanding is that they annulled the trial level, and then issued the court issued my letter of freedom, and I vaguely remember that it was a 2-to-1 decision of the 3-judge panel. I don't think it was unanimous, but I'd have to refer to my attorney for the exact details there.
So you do not know what happened with the 2 people who went for your liberation?
No, I vaguely understand that there again that there is politics involved even in the court, and that one of the judges was representing one side of the political aisle, and one was representing another, and one was supposedly neutral. And so yeah, but again, I don't know all the details. I couldn't even remember the names of the judges at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Purakal. Gracias, presidente. No tengo
Gracias,
preguntas.
juez Borea. Yo pregunto ahora a la jueza Patricia Pérez.
Judge Patricia Perez, do you have any questions? Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Yes, I can.
Thank you. Could you please, well, first of all, thank you for your testimony and the information you have provided. It's very useful to this court. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions regarding some of the issues that already have been covered by my colleagues. But in particular, you told us about what had happened in your house. I think the 11th of November. That your house was raided and your family was there. Can you explain us a little bit more about what happened that night?
Yeah, so I was being held at my real estate office, maybe about 3 blocks away from the house. And it wasn't until later, a couple weeks later, when I was actually in touch with my family, that I learned what happened at the house. So my mother, who is a doctor, was down visiting San Juan del Sur. She was staying with my older son Jabu in the house, and she had come down to help with the preventative medicine clinic that we had established in San Juan del Sur, volunteering there. But my wife had to go to law school for maybe an exam or class. So my wife was in Rivas, and my mother was alone in the house with my son Jabu. And so I heard later that police had come up to the house, but they had gone to the wrong house and tried to, invade a different house. But the neighbors had said, "Oh no, Jason doesn't live here," and pointed them to the right house. So then they came to my house and raided the house and held my mother and my son at gunpoint. And at some point in time, my wife came back from Rivas, from law school, and went to the house, and they held her there at the same time. And my understanding is that they were going through all of my belongings, and some of the things they made a list of what they took, but some of the things that were missing, some personal belongings like watches and sunglasses and things like that, things of value, were not listed on the sheet of possessions that they took. And they confiscated, I don't know, a bunch of stuff from not only the office, but the house. And I don't know at what, how long that they were there for, but they were there for, my understanding is several hours. And then, so that's my understanding of what happened at the house.
Great, thank you. And another question, when did you have the opportunity to appoint an attorney?
I know that my wife, being in law school, was able to contact one of her professors. Let's see, I think it was a Thursday that I was arrested, and that attorney came to see me on Saturday. She came into the Rivas jail. She brought a change of clothes for me from my wife, and we had to talk. The police wouldn't give us a private room to speak in. They just put 2 chairs in front of the police desk while a police officer was sitting behind the desk, and we had to talk right there in front of the police. But that was the first time that I met. She said that she was hired by my wife to represent me, and then we ended up switching attorneys later on in the case.
And how many days went through between your arrest and the moment that you could actually go to a court?
I believe so. Thursday to Friday, Saturday, it was 2 or 3 days. I think 3 days before I was put before a judge, something like that.
Okay, and so if I understood properly, you told my colleague Judge Morone that you weren't provided a translator in the opportunity before the court.
No, at no point during any part of the case was I provided a translator.
Okay. And if I understood correctly, you weren't provided medical attention during the time that you were in prison, weren't you?
Yes, that's correct. They not proper medical attention. Like when I burned my legs, they took me to the infirmary, and it was actually another prisoner that was like designated as the nurse, and he would just pop my blisters with he pulled out, there's like a small metal cabinet, and he pulled out of there a needle that was already opened, pulled out the needle and would pop the blisters, and put the needle back in the syringe cap, and then put it back in the metal cabinet. And so that was constantly happening. When I had the digestive issues and had to be carried to the infirmary multiple times, they would just roll me on my side and stick me with something. They didn't tell me what the drug was, but they would shoot me in the buttocks with some drug, and then send me back to the cell without any kind of exam or trying to figure out what was going on. They just kind of dosed me up with something and sent me back to the cell.
Okay, thank you so much. I haven't gotten any more questions, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias, jueza Pérez. Yo pregunto ahora a la jueza.
Judge Veronica Gomez, do you have any questions? Yes, Mr. President, I do.
You mentioned your son, Jazz. He was born after you returned to the United States. I understand that in the allegations, it's indicated that he should be considered as part of the victims of this case. Why?
So, Judge, as I mentioned, I have ongoing post-traumatic stress disorder and suffer from different symptoms, including nightmares and anxiety and depression. And so those symptoms end up manifesting where Jazz is a witness to that. The stress that we have, both my wife and I, the trauma that we continue to go through, Jazz is a witness to that stress and the anxiety and the depressions in the household. So he is impacted by those things, and the ongoing trauma of the case continuing even after I was deported from the country in absentia. So we feel that, if we had continued to live our lives in Nicaragua, his life wouldn't have the same impacts from the trauma of the case.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. You said that as part of possible reparations, in this case, if the court finds that there have been violations to the American Convention, that for you it was very, very important for your name, and you said, and your wife's names both to be cleared. This is what you said. Why? Which are the consequences that you're suffering today because of the legal process in Nicaragua?
So after the appellate level, when the trial was annulled, maybe just over a year later, year and a half, I'm not sure the exact timeline, the prosecutor in Nicaragua took my case to the Supreme Court. And the case was heard, again, without me being notified or my attorney being notified. So myself or my attorney was not represented at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did uphold the appellate level's finding of annulling the trial level, but immediately afterwards, the head magistrate of the Supreme Court came out in the news and publicly stated that, now the fiscal, the prosecutor, is able to retry the case. So they didn't say that there was no evidence, or that they exonerated me per se, and that's why I should remain free. They essentially gave a path for the prosecution to continue the case and retry the case. And it is also our understanding that if Nicaragua, if the prosecution were to retry the case and put out a warrant for my arrest, not only in Nicaragua, but they would have the option to put out an Interpol warrant. While we have a great relationship with the representatives in the United States, where multiple congressional officers had reviewed my case and publicly supporting my release. If I were to travel to Canada or Mexico or Spain, and there was an Interpol warrant for my arrest, I could be arrested and deported back to Nicaragua. And so there's this constant fear that we live with, where we feel like we don't, there's a risk of us traveling internationally outside the US and don't have freedom of movement.
So what you're saying is that despite the fact that the Nicaraguan government decided to deport you, it was on the basis of a decision that there would be a retrial.
That's what the head magistrate came out publicly on the news saying, yes.
I see. One thing you said before, that you had some contact with consular authorities from the United States when you were first detained, but what was their role during between your release and the moment of your deportation and arrival in the United States?
Again, I don't recall meeting with anyone from the embassy after hearing of my the results of the appellate court and me being released from prison. I remember meeting with my attorney and with the prison guards, and then my family organized for me to travel back to the United States, but I didn't meet with any consular or U.S. representatives during that time.
And the return to the U.S. was smooth when you went across the border, etc.?
That's right. We went because we had a fear that the police were going to rearrest me. And so we were fearful of going to the airport to fly out. And so my family arranged for me to be driven up to the border in the north into Honduras. And then we walked across and another vehicle picked us up. And then we went to a property there and then flew to from Tegucigalpa, I think,
Yes.
to New York City.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your answers. Eso es todo, presidente.
Muchas gracias, jueza Gómez. Yo pregunto ahora a juez Pérez.
Judge Veronica Gomez. Now, Judge Perez Manrique, do you have any questions? I do, Mr. President. Good afternoon. I wanted to ask whether the fact that you are not a Nicaraguan citizen generated, or did you perceive that because you were not Nicaraguan, you received different treatment by the authorities? The authorities that tried you and the ones that arrested you?
The ones that arrested me, I was put in cells with other Nicaraguans, and so treated, I guess, like other Nicaraguans. At one point, they did separate me from other people in the cells, and I was put in isolation. And then I was put back in with other Nicaraguans and foreigners in a different cell block. And so for the most part, to my knowledge, I was treated, I wasn't given any special treatment as a foreigner, apart from, once every couple of months, whenever the embassy would come to visit, I would get a 15-minute, 10 to 15-minute meeting with someone from the consulate. And then, yeah, so, and then the guards and the inmates didn't treat me differently. I think people knew that I was an American. And there is, a culture within the prison system itself of foreigners treated. You have to be more careful as a foreigner because you don't have relationships. You don't know all the other people in prison. So you have to be a little bit more guarded, and they're kind of like gangs in the prison or groups of guys that would get together. And so you had to be, you would get robbed and you could not retaliate against other prisoners, or it was very difficult to stand up for yourself because people would surround you. And so pretty much you just had to take the abuse as a foreigner.
O sea que usted no se sintió discriminado tampoco por el sistema.
Feel discriminated either by the justice system because you were a foreigner?
I was discriminated in the fact that I was not provided access to my to a translator, knowing, and I would tell them, English is my first language. Spanish, I know some. I can speak okay and I can read some words, but I requested a translator multiple times and was denied that access. When I was arrested, I immediately let them know, hey, I'm an American citizen. I would like to call my embassy, and I was denied that right.
Another question, it's not absolutely clear to me. The criminal proceeding, were there other people that were being charged together with you, other people that were being investigated, or was it only you?
Yeah, Judge, there were 10 other people in my case, all of them Nicaraguan, none of them that I knew before. Yeah, so it was not just me, there were other people in the case that had similar charges to mine.
And they had their trial voided, annulled. Do you know that?
I believe, yes, at the end, that the 3-judge panel of the appellate court annulled the entire trial, and I believe everyone in the case was released. That was part of the negotiation when I was released that my attorney was having with the prison guards, because we were fearful of retaliation if I was as the only American released first. And so my attorney explained to me that all the other people in my case were released ahead of me, and I was released in the middle of the night.
Usted nos contó.
You told us, with regards to the deportation, that the police told you that your visa had expired and that therefore you had to leave the country. Is that right? Did you have, or did they ever explain to you the possibility to appeal this decision in any way, to consult with an attorney with regards to this situation? I also wanted to know how many days went by from the time you were told that you were going to be deported and when that measure actually was fulfilled. Because, I mean, there's a few things that were not very clearly highlighted. So I just ask you to tell the court how this went down.
Yes, Judge. I was told by the police and the prison guards, really, that I was going to be deported because I don't know if technically it's considered a visa. It was not. It was residency. I had a residency card that initially I came in on a work visa as a Peace Corps volunteer, and then when I came back to Nicaragua, I was on a tourist visa until I went through the legal process to get a residency card, and it was for 1 year, and then it was, I think, 3 years, and then 5 years, and then my 5 years was going to be up, and I was eligible for dual citizenship. So I don't know if a residency card is the same as a visa or not, but so yes, my residency had expired while I was being held wrongfully in prison, and then when I received the news that I was going to be freed and that the prison guards told me, hey, your residency has expired. We are deporting you from the country. I don't know how long it took before that actually happened. I can't remember off the top of my head the length of time, but no, I did not. There was no process or any way to kind of appeal that decision. They just said, sign this paper, and like throughout the entire case, you just had to sign the documents that were put in front of you and move on. And so whether or not you agreed with anything that was put in front of you. So
I have one final question. When your office and home were raided, you mentioned that the police had taken several things, some that were recorded, others that were not. At some point after the criminal proceeding was voided, did they ever return any of the assets that were seized? Did they ever offer to return them? Did you have an option to appeal for these things and claim them?
yeah, the police have never returned any of the items that they've taken from my real estate office or from my home, including computers and cameras, real estate documents. I had real estate clients whose deeds were in my office, and they were, foreigners that were waiting to come back to the country to pick up their deeds, and they were just sitting in my office. Those were confiscated by the police. Any of the stuff that was taken from my home, all of that stuff. My vehicle was never returned. Nothing was ever returned. My attorney went to the police and tried to seek that those be returned, and they said no, there's nothing available. And so yeah, we haven't received anything for the goods that were taken.
Muchas gracias, señor Purakal. No tengo más preguntas que realizarle. Ha sido usted muy amable. No tengo más preguntas, señor presidente.
Muchas gracias, Ms. Perez Mojic. There are no further questions. Mr. Purakal, we thank you very much for your testimony. If you wish to stay connected and follow the rest of the audience, or to leave it, it's your choice.
Thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you. Solicito a la señora.
Thank you. I ask for the deputy registrar to call the next alleged victim proposed by the representatives, take their information and make the relevant advisories. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. President, we ask Janice Purakal to come to provide her testimony. Good afternoon, Janice. Can you hear me? Janice, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. We asked the witness to state before the court name, nationality, and country of residence.
My name is Janice Purakal. I'm an American citizen and I live in the United States.
Muchas gracias. La declarante deberá.
The witness will please limit herself to answer clearly and precisely any questions that will be asked of her. We remind that the witness is asked to state with regards to alleged difficulties that as a U.S. family, they met in Nicaragua to face an arbitrary imprisonment. The inhumane conditions and the wrongful conviction of a relative and the reparation measures that they deem necessary. We inform you that in accordance with Article 53 of the Rules of Procedure of the Court, states shall not prosecute the alleged victim, the witnesses or expert witness, the representatives or legal advisors, or take reprisals against them or their family members for statements, opinions, or legal defenses presented before the court. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. I'll now grant the floor to the representative of the alleged victim so that they may proceed with the questions.
Honorable Court, I also thank you. Ms. Purakal, could you please explain to us how you are connected to this case?
Jason Purakal is my older brother. I'm also an attorney, and I was part of the team that represented Jason during his wrongful conviction, and we fought to bring him home.
I see. And can you explain a little bit more about how you found out about Jason's arrest?
I first heard about Jason's arrest when my mother called from Nicaragua. Our mother is a doctor here in the United States, and she had been visiting Jason to help at one of the community clinics in the town. I was at home in Seattle at the time, and she called very early one morning and said that the police had taken Jason and they wouldn't tell anyone where he was. I was terrified and had no idea what was happening or why. And it actually wasn't until about 3 days later that we learned that Jason had been arrested and charged with international drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime.
And once you learned about this nightmare situation, what did you do?
When I learned that Jason had been arrested, my sister and I immediately flew to Nicaragua. We spent that first week just traveling around the country. We were going from prison to prison trying to find Jason because the authorities had been moving him from prison to prison to hide him from his attorneys and from us. So at every prison, they would just tell us that he wasn't there. And then after that first week of traveling around the country, we finally got a phone call from Jason. He had borrowed this underground cell phone from another inmate so that he could reach us. And we ended up finding him at Mamodelo, which is the maximum security prison just outside of Managua.
And once you finally found Jason, what did you do?
I spent the first 6 months of Jason's case just trying to figure out what to do. I was a very inexperienced lawyer when Jason was arrested. I had only been practicing for about 3 years at the time. And I practiced commercial litigation in Seattle. So I had no experience in criminal law, no experience in Nicaraguan law, and I didn't even speak Spanish. But I also wasn't going to let my brother die in that prison. In the first 4 months of his incarceration, he had lost nearly 40 pounds. There was no running water in the prison, no medical care, barely any food. So the conditions were just deplorable, and Jason was dying. And we had to put together a team to fight for him. So we did that over time. It didn't happen all at the same time. But over time, we had to keep adding people to the team because we were losing. Jason was dying, and we were losing the fight.
And how are you putting together this team that you say? Who was on the team?
We started with a criminal defense attorney in Nicaragua. He was very devoted to the case, but very outmatched. The government of Nicaragua had power over everyone, including the judge. So we had to keep adding to our team. We had a case manager who was helping to coordinate things with me. And he himself had actually been an American who was wrongfully convicted in Nicaragua, and he was exonerated. So we had the benefit of his experience. We also had investigators in Nicaragua. We had a human rights attorney in Washington, D.C. We had a media relations person and then several others. And we also had someone on the ground in Nicaragua who we had to pay to bring Jason food and water because the prison wouldn't supply adequate food or water.
Now, what about the legal process? Can you describe to us the legal process? Couldn't you just trust the criminal justice system in Nicaragua?
We trusted the process in the beginning, and then Jason got wrongly convicted. So during the trial, for example, the judge was meeting privately with the police in chambers. That would be unheard of in any courtroom that respects the rule of law or the impartiality of the court. And then after the trial, the judge in Jason's case took a 15-minute bathroom break, came back and convicted all of them, Jason and each of the 10 other men who were charged in the case, without any evidence at all. And we eventually learned that the judge was not actually a judge. He was never actually appointed to the bench, and he was actually wanted for fraud in another jurisdiction. So we knew that we could not trust the judicial system in Nicaragua.
I understand. And how did this whole experience affect you? How did it impact you personally?
Watching my big brother suffer in that prison is the worst thing I have ever gone through in my entire life. The worst moment of my life was when Jason called me from prison to tell me that he had been burned trying to boil water to make it potable. So I was sitting at my desk in Seattle at the law firm, and he called. When Jason was in prison, we talked nearly every day on the underground cell phone, but it was always in the afternoon. And this call came earlier in the day, so it was unusual. And so I answered the phone and I said something like, "It's early, what's up, bud?" And he said, "Janice, there's been an accident." And then he just started to cry. And I lost it. Hearing my big brother hurt like that, I just couldn't take it. He ended up suffering serious burns down both of his legs, and he ended up with a very severe infection and almost lost his legs because the prison doctors wouldn't help him.
Now, getting back to all of your efforts to get him out of prison, could you explain a little bit more about this coordinated effort that you put forth?
It was definitely an international campaign. We obviously had the defense team on the ground in Nicaragua, but we had also lobbied senators from the United States to actively urge the government of Nicaragua to review the case. We had media in the United States and in Nicaragua publicizing what was happening to Jason. And we were forming this sort of grassroots campaign. We had thousands of people who would get newsletters about Jason's case so that they could share it with other people. They were signing petitions. They were calling their senators. At one point, we also filed a petition in the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. And we did that with the help of a human rights attorney. So after reviewing the case, the United Nations ruled that Jason's detention was arbitrary. And the United Nations recommended the government release him immediately. That obviously didn't happen. Jason wasn't released until we had such an onslaught of attention on the case that the appellate court really had no other choice. I remember at one point that Jason's appeal had been sitting in the appellate courts with no movement whatsoever. So finally, I went down to Nicaragua and met with the appellate court judges. I told them that the American media wanted to know what was happening because of the delay. 4 hours after that meeting, the judges scheduled a hearing on the case. And it took months, but Jason was finally released after that hearing.
It sounds like a very comprehensive effort. Could you tell us how much money your family ended up spending to save Jason?
We ended up spending over $750,000.
Can you tell us what this significant cost was for?
The cost was to save Jason's life. And I obviously would do it all over again in a heartbeat. He's my brother and I love him. But everything obviously costs money. And we had a team that was working around the clock. There were no weekends, no holidays, no days off for any of us. We spent every minute coming up with new ways to bring attention to Jason's case and to try to get the government of Nicaragua to release him. So for example, on average, we would spend $10,000 a month on our case manager. That was his monthly fee. We would spend $20,000 a month for investigators. That was their fees. We would spend $4,000 a month for our media person. Plus, we had all these additional expenses. So my sister and I would travel to Nicaragua to check on Jason, to do media appearances, to bring attention to the case. This was before we had Zoom for that. I also had to travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with senators and lobby for support. So by the end of it, we were paying more than $30,000 a month in fees to fight the government of Nicaragua. But we had no choice. I was watching my brother suffer a slow death in that prison. I never knew what was going to happen first. If we were going to get him out, or if I was going to get a phone call that he was dead and we were too late.
Yes, I understand. But that's a lot of money. Where does that kind of money come from?
Well, we certainly don't have that kind of money laying around. Most of the money came from either borrowing from family or from an inheritance. Our grandmother passed away shortly before Jason's arrest, and sometime during his case, we received an inheritance from the sale of her house. So she had wanted all of her grandchildren to have some financial security and left us each a share of the money in her will. But most of our shares, for me, for Jason, and for our sister Jamie, went to Jason's defense. All of Jason's share went to the defense. He was left with nothing. And then obviously he also lost his house in Nicaragua, his business, his car. It was nearly $500,000 in losses. Everything that he built is gone because the government either confiscated it or we couldn't afford to keep it and pay for his defense at the same time. And he was innocent. He didn't deserve that. We didn't deserve that. The government of Nicaragua needs to make reparations to compensate Jason and the rest of us for the financial devastation that they caused.
Did you think that Jason ever committed those crimes?
I knew Jason was innocent. I know my brother. I also saw the government's case. There was just nothing there. Jason was charged with international drug trafficking, and there were no drugs, ever. The police searched his house, his office, his truck, his person. There was never a single ounce of drugs ever found. He was charged with money laundering. There were no illegal funds. The police had all of the documents from Jason's business. They confiscated all of them. And we had his accountant. We could track every single dime that came in or out of his accounts. There were no illegal transfers. But the prosecution and the court during trial didn't want to hear any of that. We were completely prevented from defending Jason.
Ms. Purakal, could you explain to us more what precisely you want out of this case? What specifically are you asking the Inter-American Court?
I guess more generally, I want something to change. I met so many prisoners at La Modelo who were suffering just like Jason was. My sister and I would go to the prison to visit Jason, and they would put you in this concrete room while you're waiting for the guards to bring him out. And so the floors are covered with these dirty pools of standing water. There are bugs all around. But these inmates would come up and talk to us because they had seen us on the news, so they knew who we were. And all of these men were suffering. They had no food. They had no water. Their families didn't know how to help them. And I remember specifically some of them begging us not to leave them behind. That was the whole reason we wanted to file this lawsuit in the first place, because something has to change.
And speaking of that, more specifically, your family in our brief to the court has asked the court, the Honorable Tribunal, to order training and education, not just for the judges, but also for the prosecutors in Nicaragua. What is your reasoning there? Why is that?
The reasoning is that we know how wrongful convictions happen. There are organizations that study wrongful convictions. There's all kinds of literature about the leading causes of wrongful convictions. It's things like junk science or eyewitness misidentifications or government misconduct. These are all leading causes that we know trigger wrongful convictions. So prosecutors and judges have to understand those causes and their own role in preventing wrongful convictions, what they can do to stop a wrongful conviction from happening in the first place. It's not just a problem for the defendant. We have to actually train judges and prosecutors to be aware of the red flags that should be telling them to take a closer look. At the end of the day, we just don't want what happened to Jason to happen to anyone else.
Now, the Honorable Court may not be aware of this, but after Jason was finally released, you yourself, as an attorney, started to defend wrongfully convicted individuals in the United States. Can you explain to us why you did that?
During Jason's case, I met so many people who were wrongfully convicted and needed help in Nicaragua and in the United States. And most of those people did not have a sister who was a lawyer or a mother who's a doctor. They didn't know how the judicial system works or even where they were supposed to start. When we were working Jason's case, we ended up getting so much help from other people, and I wanted to turn around and pay that forward. So I started a nonprofit organization in the United States to work on wrongful convictions that involve junk science, where bad science gets used and it leads to a wrongful conviction. Part of Jason's case was based on junk science, the vapor tracer that the police were claiming to have used. So I started this organization in honor of Jason, to honor what he went through and his resilience to survive it all. The logo behind me, I don't know if you can see it, it's right here. It's actually Jason's handwriting from the prison wall. So at one point during the incarceration, I snuck this small camera into the prison to have Jason take pictures of the human rights abuses. And when I got the camera back, I was looking through the photos, and one of the last photos was this picture of Jason sitting next to the prison wall. And he had scratched up on the wall, crimes committed, 0. Evidence, 0. Days in prison. And then he had these tally marks representing the days. So after he got out and came back to the United States, I started this organization, I had my graphic designer lift his handwriting from the photo of the prison wall to create the logo for the nonprofit. So that I would always remember that my client is someone's brother or sister or father or mother. Someone is waiting for that person to come home, just like we were waiting for Jason to come home.
Thank you very much, Janice. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Muchas gracias al representante de las presuntas víctimas. Pregunta ahora a las señoras jueces y jueces.
The judges, if they want to formulate any questions. Judge Diego Moreno Rodriguez.
First of all, Ms. Purakal, thank you for being here. Your testimony is very valuable for this court. You made some estimations in terms of how much was spent in terms of fees for assembling this team and over the years. How many years have you devoted yourself to the cause of your brother? Can you make an estimation of how many years you have devoted to this?
Thank you for the question. Yes, as soon as Jason got home in September of 2012, I turned around and started working on wrongful convictions in the United States. So it has been almost 13 years at this point. And initially, I started working just with local attorneys until I formed the organization.
The question is, how much of your time was devoted specifically to your brother?
Oh, yes, thank you. So during the 2 years that Jason was incarcerated, I was working full-time on Jason's case. I was also a lawyer at the time, and I was very fortunate to work at a law firm that understood how important it was to fight for Jason. So they gave me leave to be able to do that while I was working my cases on the side. So I can't tell you the number of hours.
They gave you what? Can you repeat that? They gave you
They
what?
gave me leave. So
leave. Okay.
they were.
So you were not earning money at the time while you were spending time in Jason's case. Is that correct?
No, that's not actually correct. I was earning money because I was working overnight on my cases for the firm, so that during the daytime I could work on Jason's case.
I see. So this took a big toll on you physically and emotionally as well.
Very much so. And my entire salary was going to Jason's defense fees. So that's why I had to keep working, because we needed that income to make sure that we could keep paying for the team.
So could you make an estimation of how much you devoted of your salary to Jason's cause?
I would estimate it was probably in the range of half my salary at the time. And at that point in time, I was making a little over $100,000 a year. So half my salary was going to Jason's case.
Thank you very much for being here this afternoon, Ms. Purakal. I have no further questions, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias, juez Moreno. Yo pregunto ahora a la jueza, al juez.
Now I ask Judge Alberto Borea, do you have any questions? No, Mr. President, I have no questions. Thank you very much I want to thank Janice Purakal for her answers. Thank you, Judge Borea. I now ask Judge Perez, do you have any questions? No, thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Judge Perez. Now I ask Judge Veronica Gomez if you wish to ask any questions. Yes, Mr. President.
What was your, did you at some point Were you concerned, you were clearly concerned about your brother's safety and health in prison, from what we've heard. Were you concerned for those working in the team, including yourself, on the ground in Nicaragua?
We were very much so. During the first year that Jason was incarcerated, I did not travel to Nicaragua. And after that first time we went there, because we were so concerned that the police were going to target me or my sister or my mother, and we would end up in a cell right next to Jason. It wasn't until after we had a team in place and we had security protocols in place that I would actually travel there. And when I did, we had an entire protocol that we would go through. We had a security person on the ground who would pick me up from the airport. He would drive me to the hotel and walk me to the door. And then if I wanted to leave at any point, he would come get me from the door and drive me to where I needed to go. I was never out of his sight.
Thank you. We asked this question to your brother, but I'm asking you, why do you think this happened? I mean, clearly, you, after listening to other persons deprived of liberty, you know that. I mean, this inspired you to start your own nonprofit on this issue. But why do you think? You have a theory about what happened?
That's a hard question because we spent so much time trying to figure out the answer to that question when Jason was in. And we just ended up going in circles, trying to figure out who was behind it, what did they want, and we never came up with a definitive answer. So eventually we just had to give up that quest and focus on trying to get Jason out.
Okay. Do you think, because considering, the length of many trials in Latin America and other parts of the world as well, what do you think was the factor that contributed to your brother being released at 22 months and then the deportation? Because according to, he mentioned that then there was a decision for a retrial, but he was deported before. So that's rather unusual. Somebody who is up for a retrial is not really let out of the territorial jurisdiction. So why do you think that happened?
I think that Jason was released and deported largely because of the amount of political and media pressure on the case. I think that it became somewhat of a liability for the government because there was so much media attention that was happening consistently to call out what the government was doing, and it was international. It wasn't just local to Nicaragua. It was the American media consistently asking for answers. We had, at one point in time, we had 43 senators and representatives from Washington, D.C. writing a letter to the government of Nicaragua. It just became so much that that's what tipped it over the edge.
So you think is your strategy of having a team, having a political dimension and a media dimension?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And we asked him how was his return to the US, and it was sort of unusual that he went to another country and then, well, tell us why was that your strategy? Why did you decide it, to do it that way?
We were very concerned that when Jason was released, they were going to turn around and rearrest him. And we were very concerned about him going through the airport in Nicaragua because that was always the place that was uncontrolled. They could pull someone aside to search them, to plant evidence at any point in time. And so we were very concerned about that. And we ended up having our team take Jason by car to another country and fly out from there in order to avoid the airport in Nicaragua.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No tengo más preguntas, señor presidente.
Muchas gracias, jueza Gómez. Yo pregunto ahora, juez.
Judge Gomez. I now ask Judge Perez Manrique, do you have any questions? Yes, Mr. President. With your authorization. Good afternoon, madam. You told us that the government had authority over everything, even the judges, and that you couldn't trust the system in Nicaragua. I want to ask you, based on these affirmations, was there any way in which this power undermined your brother's defense before the authorities in Nicaragua, the judicial system in Nicaragua? What led you to make this statement, basically?
Yes, thank you for the question. We were always very concerned about the relationship between the judge and the police. The judge was meeting privately with the police and taking direction in order to make decisions in the case. And that was very concerning to us. That would never happen in a US court. We would never see the judge meeting privately with a party. That would happen in the light, on the record. So we were very concerned about that. And then during Jason's case, we would find out that the judges, for example, the trial judge was not actually a judge. So he had not actually been appointed a judge. They put him in place on this case. And we understood from the investigators that he was specifically put in place on this case to convict. So immediately after he convicted everyone, he left town. And I can't remember which country he ended up going to. But that was always our concern, is that he was put there in order to render the conviction and not to actually look at the evidence. During the case itself, when we would offer evidence, he would rule everything is irrelevant that the defense offers. So when we said, Jason's been charged with money laundering, we have his accountant, the accountant can testify to the money. The judge said, that's irrelevant. I don't want to hear from the defense on that. So everything that we were trying to do to make a fair trial was being denied. And that was very frustrating to us.
If I'm not misunderstanding, the judge rejected the evidence before even hearing it, before including it in the file then. You said, I want to provide this evidence, and he said, this is not helpful, and he just continued on. Is that correct? That's how he acted?
That's correct.
Bien.
Well, from that perspective, when your judge was sentenced to preventive prison, or he was assigned preventive prison, the imprisonment was assigned. They were talking about a case, a complex case, which means that preventive prison is longer, the minimum term. And there's an investigation or an opinion that says this is an anomalous decision. How did the defense react in light of this decision of extending the preventive prison to its maximum amount under Nicaraguan law?
Thank you for the question. I can tell you from my perspective what our response was. Because I don't speak Spanish, I can't tell you what the defense attorney in Nicaragua specifically was arguing, but I can tell you generally what our response to that was. We were very upset. By that point in time, Jason was already suffering from all kinds of medical issues. He was starving in prison, and we felt like this is going to delay things even further and affect his health and our ability to bring him home. So we wanted to get to trial. Obviously, getting to trial didn't help us at the end of the day. He was convicted, but that was our main concern, was trying to get Jason's health taken care of by getting him out of that prison, and turning this into a complex case and extending the timeline by that much was just destroying his mental health and his physical health.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your statement. You were very clear and specific. And the work you have done is also impressive. No more questions, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. Thank you, Judge Perez Manrique. There are no further questions, madam. If you wish, you may step down or you may remain connected and listen to the rest of the hearing. I would now ask the Assistant Registrar to call the next witness brought by the representatives and take her particulars so we can and give the warnings. Yes, Mr. Vice President, Scarlett Flores. Mr. Vice President, if I may, could we take a 3-minute break? Yes, yes. Let's take a 5-minute break and we will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Good afternoon. I will continue to preside over this hearing for reasons beyond our control. We are listening to the arguments in the case Puracal v. Nicaragua, and I would ask the assistant registrar to call the next witness and give and take her particulars. Please proceed. Scarlett Flores is invited to join the hearing. Ms. Flores, can you hear me? Could you please activate your microphone? Can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Madam Witness, please tell the court your name, nationality, and place of and country of domicile. I am Scarlett Flores Pardas. I am Nicaraguan by birth, and I live currently in the United States. Thank you. Please limit yourself to answering the questions clearly and specifically. You were brought before the court to make a statement concerning the impact of the imprisonment of your spouse and the effect of exile in a country that have a different language and culture. The challenges you face to rebuild your life in a foreign country and to take over the care of your two children, one of whom has special needs. Be advised that in keeping with Article 53 of the Rules of Procedure of the Court, states may not institute proceedings against witnesses, expert witnesses, or alleged victims, or the representatives or legal advisors, nor exert pressure or reprisals on them or on their families on account of statements, opinions, or legal defenses presented before the court. Thank you. Mr. President. Thank you. I will now recognize the representative of the alleged victim to proceed with the questioning. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, I, Alejandro Gonza, will proceed with the questioning. Scarlett, can you hear me? Can you see me on your screen? Yes. Could you please tell this court who is Scarlett and why are you here today? Good afternoon to everyone. I am Nicaraguan by birth. I'm the mother of two children, Jago, who is 18, and Jazz, who is 11. We currently live, my husband and I, Jason Purakal, and I am here because I believe in truth. I believe in justice and in memory. Because what we have been through, for me, is it would be an act of respect. Coming here is an act of respect for myself, for my family, and for so many other people whose voices also should be heard. Scarlett, could you please tell this court briefly what your life was like before your husband was arrested and wrongly convicted? At that time, we were growing professionally, financially, and also personally. I was studying law at the time in the Department of Rivas, and at the same time, I was doing my internship in the office of the prosecutor of San Juan del Sur. I also worked in the legal office of Jason's real estate company. I apologize. We had just built our dream house. And with the birth of our first child, Jabu, we became even closer. He was born with Down syndrome, and so this required full-time care, constancy, devotion, and deep, deep love. And this strengthened us as a family. I felt fully satisfied. I felt greatly blessed. And above all, I was very excited about tomorrow, about the future. I know this is hard for you, Scarlett, but could you please tell us briefly what happened to you when Jason was arrested? remember that that day was normal. Everything was happening normally. Jason had gone off to the office. I had finished my work that day in the office of the public prosecutor, and then I went to the university to take an exam. It was during the exam that I received a call in which I was told that Jason was in danger. I went as quickly as I could to his office, and that was when I saw a scene that I had never seen before, except in the movies. The office was surrounded by police cars, and when I went in, I saw that they had Jason handcuffed and that he was being held by masked, heavily armed men. I asked them to show me an arrest warrant, but all they gave me was screams. They shouted at me, they pushed me around, and they threatened me. They said that if I stayed there, they would also arrest me. I remember very clearly that Jason shouted from the back of the office, and he said, "Scarlett, go home. Go take care of the boy." So I did. The scene at the house was quite similar. It was a situation of violence, of alarm, and of horror. I didn't know what was happening. Also, I asked them to show me their arrest warrant, but all I received in exchange was shouts. Told me to just follow orders that they were giving me. And I saw that they were confiscating all of our valuable personal items. That day was when Jason went missing. The next few days, I spent all my time looking for him everywhere. I couldn't find him. I received no information about what was happening with him. I was forced to look, and I also had to hire professional services of an attorney. And finally, I found out that he was alive. I remember that the first time I saw Jason was on the television on the evening news. And after that, I saw him leaving the courtroom.
I was among the crowd, and I remember that an escort got him out. The officers were masked and armed. I remember that his gaze kind of looked into oblivion. They had shaved his head. He didn't even recognize me among the crowd. That was when I realized that our life, as it was, had changed forever. And can you tell the court how exactly is that your life changed with this arrest, with this case, and the life of your son and the son, your second son, Jess? Yes, we immediately suffered devastating losses because of this. I was forced to resign from the public prosecutor's office. I had to put on hiatus my college studies. Jabu and myself were forced to leave our home, and we had to start spending the nights at neighbors' houses, friends' houses, and other relatives. Jabu lost the special care that he was receiving, and therefore, in the short term, his health was impacted because he had delays in learning how to speak. And again, he started having reflux and incontinence, things that we had already worked on since he was born up to his 3 years of age. And because Jason's office was shut down, his workers started seeking me out because they needed to be paid. They needed to have their easement paid and their, social services paid. And I didn't have a way of paying for these responsibilities because our accounts had been seized. I only had the cash that I had in my purse, and with the support through donations from friends and relatives. While Jason's case was occurring, my reputation, my image were gravely harmed. I'm sorry. My public image was exposed without my consent on TV media. I was nicknamed the mob girlfriend, and that led me to be the target of harassment, sexual harassment, and that led people to make indecent proposals and comments to me. No longer people looked at me as a professional, as a promising student. And while Jason's trial was going on, Jabu and myself, we were really in the eye of the hurricane, in the eye of the storm. And we were the toys of public opinion with no type of protection. Thank you very much, Scarlett. Do you need a... I must also add that my credit score was affected, gravely affected, because I no longer had financial resources to continue paying my debts. And the high level of stress that I was under started taking a toll on my health. I was in and out of public centers, health centers, because I started losing weight, because I wasn't, eating properly. I wouldn't sleep well, and I was living in constant fear. Everything that we were as a family and everything that we projected as a family was completely left on hiatus. And the only thing that was left with us was an open sore. Thank you for your strength, Scarlett. Could you tell the court the consequences of moving to the United States after Jason was deported, and how your family transferred there? Well, the moving to the United States after Jason was deported was not something that it was not a family returning willingly to their country. Even though Jason was going back to the country where he was born and where he was raised, for Jabu and myself, it was a culture shock. We did not speak the language. We did not have any relatives there. Our support network was very small. The fear, the lack of a cultural connection to the location made it so that we did not have any kind of space to recover. Jason immediately had to go out to seek employment, and I eventually had to also take on cleaning jobs because we were facing constant obstacles. I had no legal status there. I did not have medical insurance. I did not have access to education either. So it took me a long time. The step by step to achieve some kind of stability took me a while. I also remember that my pregnancy, I spent it alone. I was very sad. I did not receive the support that any woman deserves in that stage of her life. My son, Jazz, was born without the presence of my mother's family, and that separation, I can only explain it through this feeling of being like an orphan. That's the only way I can express it. To this present day, he's still a young kid, and he still does not understand the impact that we paid and that he paid as well as a victim, because he does not have Nicaraguan nationality that is legally acknowledged. And with the new law that is being passed in Nicaragua, Jabu, Jazz, and myself are at risk of losing forever that right. Thank you very much, dear Scarlett. Could you also briefly tell the court if you've gone back to Nicaragua? And if so, have you suffered any repercussions or any reprisals when you tried to go back? Yes, I have returned in just a handful of occasions to Nicaragua. The first was in 2016 due to a family medical emergency. And the following 2 times were in 2018. And that was because I was trying to do the paperwork necessary to be registered as an attorney and public notary at the Supreme Court in Nicaragua. But because there was social unrest at the time, they did not tend to me. And the last trip there, I suffered an attack. I was talking to a friend just outside my home, right in front of it. And 2 individuals pointed a gun at us. I still have nightmares about this. We both immediately went to the closest police station. We explained what happened to us. I was set aside, and the officer told me, Magu, I recommend you do not miss the flight you have scheduled for tomorrow. And he gave me a piece of paper with a phone number on it. And he said, when you're at the airport, let us know. Call this number. We want to be certain that you're leaving the country. So that experience made it clear that I was not welcome in Nicaragua. That was the last time I was there, because before having the dream to be sworn in as an attorney being one of my priorities and achieving that achievement, first and foremost, I'm a mother, and there are 2 children who depend on me. Thank you very much, dear Scarlett. Now, with this opportunity, you're here before the honorable judges and court. What do you expect of this court? Before I ask anything from the court, I wanted to thank each and every one of you for this opportunity, for this forum, for the ability to be heard this afternoon. And respectfully, I want to ask each and every one of you to acknowledge our innocence, to have our name and record clean of the father of my child. Have everything that was seized from us returned. Reparations for everything that was damaged. To have, please, the person who sentenced Jason, first of all, to 22 years in prison without any kind of evidence, investigated. It is of my personal interest. I want to know the reasons, the motivations for him to act the way he did, so far removed from professional ethics.
And I want to close with this. By saying that giving this testimony for me is an act of love for my children, because tomorrow I want them to look me in the eyes and be able to look at them proudly and say that I was courageous, that I was strong, that I never grew weary. I never stopped asking to be heard or to be given the opportunity to demonstrate that we are innocent. And I never gave up, ever. I never gave up in the face of injustice. Thank you. Thank you, Scarlett. In these last couple of minutes, is there anything else you would like to add to this court? Yes, I would. I would like to add that everyone who is watching me online right now, if you're seeing me on the screen, whether you're watching it now or watch it later, those of you who are victims, I want to encourage you not to give up. I want to encourage you to be brave. Always knock on doors, find the right doors and knock on them, because I believe, and I believe deeply, in justice here on earth and beyond, divine justice. Thank you. Thank you. This completes my questioning of the witness. Mr. President, thank you. Thank you, Madam Representative. We will now move along to questions by the judges on the court, if you so desire. First of all, I will recognize Judge Diego Moreno. Do you have any questions for the witness? Please proceed. Thank you, Mr. President. This witness statement was eloquent and very complete, and therefore I have no further questions. I would only like to thank you, Madam Witness, for your testimony before the court this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Judge Moreno. Judge Alberto Borea, do you have any questions? Yes, Mr. President, I have a few questions. The first is this. What year was it that you, the last time you went to Nicaragua? It was in 2018, the last time I went. So you went 3 times, 2016, 2018, and were there any others, or was it twice in 2018? No, in 2018, I went twice. And both times I went in order to do the paperwork so I could be sworn in professionally. And the last time I went, I also wanted to do some repairs on our family home. My second question is on the same subject, which is this. Up until 2018, do you know what the status is of your family home at this point? Yes, your family home. And the items that you had in the house, your goods in the house that were not taken during the raid. At the beginning, I had to rent out the house. It was full of all of our possessions. Oh, but as time went by, I was very unfortunate because I had to try to maintain the house by remote control at long distance. So now the house is deteriorating. When I have any income, I need to divide it between the needs I have here for my daily life, and another part of my income needs to be sent to Nicaragua. Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Madam Flores, for your witness. Thank you. Thank you, Judge Borea. Judge Patricia Perez Goldberg, do you have any questions? No, Mr. President. I would simply like to thank Mrs. Flores for your very complete statement, which has been very valuable, very useful for the court as we resolve this case. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Judge. Judge Veronica Gomez, do you have any questions? I do. I have one brief question. Scarlett, in a sense, you already said this, but could you clarify, please, the nationality right now, your nationality and your children's nationality, especially the older one, Jabu. We know that Jazz was born in the United States. I naturalized here in the United States in 2022. Jabu, at least so far, has dual nationality because he was born in Nicaragua and his father processed his American nationality at the time. Jazz is only a U.S. citizen. Thank you for that. No more questions, Mr. President. Thank you. Madam Flores, for myself, I have no further questions, and we have no further questions. So thank you so much for your statement. If you wish, you may remain online to watch the rest of the hearing. We will now call a break in the session. We will resume tomorrow at 7:30 Costa Rica time in the morning in order to receive a statement from the expert witness brought by the representatives of the alleged victim and to hear the final closing arguments by the representatives of the alleged victims and the final observations by the commission concerning the merits and possible reparations and costs in the incident case. We now suspend the session. Thank you very much.